It's the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter. It's the Wednesday edition, and OTAs for the Steelers have resumed, and Cam Heyward has arrived. We'll talk about what his arrival means both for himself and the rest of the defensive line, as well as Jaron Jones' very impressive start against the Dodgers last night. We'll have Ray Fittipaldo and Noah Hiles here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We've got Ray Fittipaldo here with us, one of our great Steelers beat writers, and we'll be talking about the Cam Heyward situation as he did return to OTAs on Tuesday, and we got to talk to him for the first time this offseason since the end of last season. As always, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, they have over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. And there's so many great things to love about Mike's Beer Bar. We'll get more into them later. And you can find this show, the North Shore Drive podcast, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel for all our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes. All right, Ray. So when Cam Heyward showed up yesterday, I mean, it's not entirely a surprise because he's supposed to, like, he's a guy that's traditionally been there, but it was a surprise if you just weren't seeing it coming after he sat out last week and the last 2 weeks. And then he showed up and he spoke to us and he talked about wanting an extension. He said, hey, they're still not close, but he wanted to come in and, you know, he wanted to be part of the team. But he also talked about he wants to play 3 more years in the NFL. What did you take away from Cam Heyward's first time talking to us this offseason period?
Yeah, I mean, first off, Chris, I don't know why you would stay away from OTAs for 2 weeks and then show up before it's mandatory. I don't really get that part of the negotiating ploy. I've said from the outset that he's either getting bad advice or he's overestimating, his situation there in terms of, trying to get a new contract. But just, in the big picture, when I look at it, he said, I want to play for 3 more years. And he inferred, that one of his last answers to the questions we had for him, he mentioned being a one helmet guy. And I went through in my story and I mentioned all the one helmet guys with the Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger, Hines Ward, Mel Blount, all those guys. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them. And, he wants to be one of those one helmet guys, but he came out and said, I'm not going to just retire so that could happen. So he kind of put the pressure back on the Steelers like, hey, I'm going to play next season if it's for the Steelers or someone else. So I don't know that Cam needed to say that. I thought, just, hey, show up and play and, let the negotiation sort of play out. But, I thought he maybe ratcheted up the pressure there when maybe at this early stage you really didn't need to.
Yeah, that's the question that I have about how he's going about this. Like, what's his strategy? What is he trying to force the Steelers? And also, what is he asking for? Like, what is his asking price? Because if you're the Steelers and there's I feel like there is a way for these two to meet in the middle. But Cam Heyward, being 35, even if he gets back to where he was 2 years ago, because personally, I feel like there's a lot of people saying, oh, he's injury prone because he got injured last year. He played 2 17-game seasons the 2 years before that. Like, let's not erase like an 11-year career plus, 13-year career plus for one season of being hurt. He's been a very healthy guy at a very tough position at the interior defensive line. So, yes, there is the question is as far as will he get back to where he was 2 and 3 years ago? But I think that if he can understand, like, hey, Cam, not only is this about you, but it's also about they have a lot of offensive contracts that they need to figure out. Neither of the quarterbacks that they signed this year are signed to the team past this year. Right. So that's something they're going to have to figure out. Najee Harris's contract will be up. Pat Fryman's contract will be up. George Pickens is coming down the line. There's a lot of moves that are going to have to be made. And if Cam Heyward wants to make it easier on the team to do that, it might take some sort of, again, meeting the Steelers in the middle here. He's a $22 million cap this year, I believe. And I don't think he can be that moving forward if they want to do what they want to do to address other parts of the team.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a team that has had a ton of money invested in the defense. for most of the recent past. And, I think eventually when you invest higher picks in the offense, it's going to come time when those guys are good enough that you're going to want to re-sign them. Pat
Right.
Freiermuth being the first and obvious one this year. You mentioned the quarterback situation. So, to me, I've said this all along, Chris. If I'm the Steelers, I just let it play out. I let him play this year, collect his $16 million salary, and then I revisit it between the end of the season and the start of the new league year. There's that 6 or 7 week period where you can negotiate with your own players. And I think they have a good enough relationship with Cam Heyward that, if both sides want to do something at that point, they could certainly get it done. I would not give him any new money, certainly no new guarantees in a new contract before the season. I think the smart play from a business perspective is just to let it play out and see how Cam does this year and then revisit it after the season.
Absolutely. I think this is a very important topic as far as how this works out, because like you said, even beyond the one helmet guy thing, Cam Heyward has been a face of the Steelers. Like he has been one of those guys. Like there's been guys who have stuck with the Steelers for a long time, and then there's guys that they carry the flag out for Franco Harris at like a day after he passes for the game that he was going to get commemorated at and get his number retired. Like there are lots of factors that play into this. If you're the Steelers and you're looking at and you're looking at what you want to keep with Cam Heyward, because he also brings that leadership. He also brings that stability. And I think that's something that this team could use. There's a lot of youth on this team. There's a lot of questions on this team. Granted, the defense kind of has it, but I also think the Steelers, they don't have the ready next Cam Heyward lining up. Like Keanu Benton may get there, and we'll talk about him in a bit, but Keanu Benton may get there, but there's no lined up ready to go next. Like Stephon Tuitt would have been that guy ideally. Like if a Stephon Tuitt doesn't retire early and everything that went on with him, then maybe we aren't having this discussion as much, because he is the next guy and he's already getting paid that kind of money. But he's not. And Larry Ogunjobi has been okay. Keanu Benton's a second-year player. DeMarvin Leal is trying to figure things out in his third year. I don't think the Steelers have a ready answer. And I think that is something that Cam Heyward does have on his side, is that hey, I've been a leader. I've been the guy for you. My last year was a hiccup as far as an injury. And the way that I play is a power style of football that does not dwindle as much when I get older. And I think those are all things that could work in Cam Heyward's favor. But I still think there will be a point where these two parties have to meet in the middle and agree on a number that works for the Steelers, but also gets Cam what he thinks he deserves to be compensated.
Yeah, listen, Cam is right. He is a unique player, and you referenced the part where he kind of compared himself to a power lifter. Actually, Mike Tomlin drew that comparison last year, Cam told us. And, I think he's right in some ways. Cam's game is built on power and technique, and power lifters can, compete into their 40s. But the thing that really doesn't jive there is power lifters don't have 320-pound offensive linemen potentially caving in their knee and ending their season just on one play, freak accident or whatever. Power lifters don't have to handle double teams. So, I appreciate what Cam was trying to get at there, but the injury issue and the age issue is always going to be a factor. It happens at every position. You go back to when Hines Ward just lost a step and he couldn't compete anymore. And the writing was on the wall that it was going to be his last season. So, injuries catch up to you. Mother Nature catches up to you. And, I think every Steelers fan hopes that Cam Heyward can bounce back and have a typical Cam Heyward type of season. But I think we all know the chances of that happening decrease significantly when you're 34, 35, 36 years of age.
Absolutely. We'll have more to talk about in the Steelers OTAs here in a second here on the North Shore Drive podcast, brought from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, it's on the North Shore. It's on Federal Street, right across the street from PNC Park. They have outdoor seating, indoor seating. They have over 20 televisions, so you can catch whatever sporting events you want. And they have the best selection of beer in town, over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are for the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap every single day. And they're always rotating new ones in and out, so you can always get a new experience every time you go. and they have amazing food like Steak on a Stone, where you get your choice cut of steak brought to you on a heated stone, and every time you cut off a piece, you just press it into that stone, and you choose how well done you want every single bite of your steak. It's Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in Pittsburgh. Go there today, and when you get there, tell them Chris sent you. We're back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter here with Ray Fittipaldo. We had to switch up our show midway because midway there was some breaking news, Ray. Our own Jerry Dulac from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Breaking news like we always do at this organization. Jerry Dulac breaks that Steelers are meeting with Cam Sutton, the cornerback who they drafted back in 2017 and had played with the Lions and been recently released. They're expected to sign him to a one-year deal for the veteran minimum per sources, according to our own Jerry Dulac. Ray, this is something we talked about the possibility of happening, but we weren't sure when it would happen, if it would happen. And here it is apparently about to happen in the middle of OTA so that Cam Sutton can show up on the last week of OTAs. Minicamp is next week. This has been a very wild journey for Cam Sutton because this is a guy who was a beloved, role player for the Steelers, had some really good years with the team, had 3 interceptions in his last year with the team, played really well for them, and then went to Detroit. Didn't have a great year, gave up some touchdowns and wasn't exactly the big playmaker that he was in Pittsburgh. But then his obvious situation where, he got into, domestic violence accusations. He was, not being able to be found by the cops. He had to turn himself in. It was like a 2-week period where no one knew where he was. He gets released by the Lions. This has been a crazy journey to get here to this point. And I do wonder if there's going to be anything that still comes of the situation that he was in, whether it's a suspension or other things of the fallout that the Steelers might have to consider here.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I would have to believe that the Steelers front office got some kind of information from the NFL about there won't be a suspension or the length of the suspension before they would make this move. So that tells me that whatever Cam Sutton has coming to him, the Steelers believe that it's not going to be so bad that it's going to, cut into him playing a lot this season. So we don't know what that's going to be yet, but to me, the Steelers signing him now tells me that they probably have some kind of an idea of what's coming down the road. Look at it from a football perspective. Steelers secondary just got a whole heck of a lot better, didn't they?
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, you slot him in. He doesn't have to be an outside corner anymore.
He doesn't.
I mean,
right.
You mentioned he struggled a little bit last season with the Lions. I thought he was okay for the Steelers in that role, but he's getting a little bit older, but he's a guy who can play anywhere in that secondary. He could play slot corner for you. He's going to be a chess piece. He can play safety. He can play everywhere that you want in any of your sub packages. So they're going to be very creative with him. He knows the system. From strictly a football perspective, this is a very good signing for the Steelers. I know there might be some concern on some of the part of the fan base about, what he went through this offseason, but strictly from a football perspective, this move made the Steelers stronger today.
I think so too, because you get a guy that he's going to know your system. He was just here 2 years ago. Like he's not going to have to learn too much. He knows Terrell Austin. Terrell Austin knows how he wants to use him. And again, like his numbers weren't great this past year. You look at 2023, he allowed 8 touchdowns, only had 1 interception and 7 passes broken up, had 122 of a passer rating allowed when he was targeted. But just the year before with the Steelers, he allowed 4 touchdowns, had 3 interceptions, 8 passes broken up, and the passer rating allowed was 69.6 in 2022 for the Steelers. If the Steelers, listen, different systems, like we talk about how there's system quarterbacks and there's system how systems impact guys. Same thing can be said for defensive backs, and maybe that's what happened to Cam Sutton in Detroit, was that it just wasn't a fit for what they were asking him to do. And the other thing is, like you said, even if he lines up on the outside, he's not going to be the number 1 corner. That's Joey Porter Jr. So now he can worry about covering number 2 wide receivers, or maybe he is the slot guy, because that's the one position, like you've said, we don't know who that will be. Maybe it'll be Beanie Bishop. Maybe it'll be this guy. Maybe it'll be that guy. Now you don't need to necessarily start an undrafted free agent rookie at the slot cornerback position. And maybe Beanie Bishop still gets it, and maybe Cam Sutton beats out Donte Jackson. But like you said, this does nothing but make the Steelers' defensive backfield better, because now you have a guy who's experienced, a guy who knows your system, who's been good in your system, who's a veteran. And again, it also takes pressure off of needing a Cory Trice or a Darius Rush or a Ryan Watts or any of those guys to have to step up this year and be ready in case one guy goes down.
Yeah, absolutely. So they've got their starters set on defense now. Slot corner was the last position that was open, so they are set now. There is still some question about, in my mind at least, about depth at outside corner. You know,
Right.
You mentioned Cory Trice, Darius Rush. Is there another move to be had there? What does this mean, this signing today? What does that mean for Patrick Peterson? Listen, Chris, backup cornerbacks have to play special teams. I don't know that Patrick Peterson at his age could do that or would want to do that, or the Steelers would want to have him do that. So is he not an option anymore? Or is that still something that could happen later in the summer? If not, you're still going to have to make a move. I think you need to upgrade an outside corner unless Cory Trice or Darius Rush or one of these other corners who are on the offseason roster right now step up and prove they can handle that job. So to me, they got a whole lot better today. But in terms of their depth at corner, I still think there might be another move that's coming down the road here.
Absolutely. I do think there's something else coming for the Steelers. I also think that they want to see what Cam Sutton still has. Like, has he been able to stay in shape with all the things that have been going on? Has there been other things that have been, has he worked on different things to become better, to show that he was better than what he did last year for the Lions? Could he be an outside corner? Because his last year with the Steelers, he did play a lot of outside corner. In fact, most of his 993 snaps, 655 of them were at the outside corner position. He did also play 185 snaps in the slot, so decent amount there too. But I think that's the other thing that this is really good for the Steelers. It gives you a flexible guy, which I wasn't sure there was a flexible guy on this roster. I think Donte Jackson is just an outside guy. Joey Porter just an outside guy. Now Cam Sutton, that was something that Mike Tomlin loved and felt he had in a few guys. Now Cam Sutton can be a guy that hey, you can put him in the slot, you can line up outside, you can move him around, and that can allow your secondary more flexibility. And we were just talking about how maybe the secondary is the most underrated part of this team because of Minkah Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Elliott, Joey Porter Jr., and the other guys being role players. Cam Sutton is a heck of a role player to add to that mix, again, who's smart. And a big part of Terrell Austin's defense is thinking on your feet, is knowing what the Steelers are disguising, knowing what the other team's trying to do, and how to combine those two to create the turnover player, to create havoc for opposing quarterbacks. Those are things that I think Cam Sutton can still be very good at for the Steelers.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Think about how cerebral Minkah Fitzpatrick is. That just gives you another player, who has that in his toolbox. And really, that's been something that's drawn the Steelers to Cam Sutton since he came out of Tennessee way back in 2017. That was always a part of it. It's not like he just got into the NFL and developed that. He was a guy at Tennessee who was very cerebral about the game, knew how to play the game of football and understood it. And really, that's kind of undervalued sometimes. A lot of times, we'll look at guys 40 times, their vertical leap, all that combine related stuff. But Cam Sutton was a 3rd round pick, a top 100 pick, but he was in the 90s. And he's a guy who has carved out himself a nice little career because he is able to think the game above his shoulders. So, again, there's going to be a portion of this fan base that will criticize this move for obvious reasons, but I cannot think of any from a football perspective where people would question this. This is a good move for the Steelers defense. You said we'll have to see what kind of shape he's in, but listen, Chris, he's got 2 months to get in shape before the season. I think he'll be fine in that regard.
Absolutely. He's Ray Fittipaldo from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, one of our great Steelers beat writers. Read all of our work at post-gazette.com. We're switching to the Pirates. We got Noah Hiles. Jared Jones had the game of his life against one of the most loaded teams in baseball in the Dodgers. We'll discuss what he did there next on the North Shore Drive podcast. Here on the North Shore Drive podcast, I'm Chris Carter here with Noah Hiles, one of our great Pittsburgh Pirate beat writers at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And Noah, that was a wild 1-0 game that you got to cover Tuesday night in Pittsburgh as the Pirates took down the Dodgers. And Jared Jones, some people were thinking maybe he's fallen off, maybe his run was done. And he came in and pitched a hell of a game. What did you see that allowed Jared Jones to shut down such a loaded Dodgers team?
I have two big takeaways. Number one, Jared Jones's fastball was back. I think part of the reason for his struggles, if you want to call them struggles, I really call it one bad outing in Detroit a day after his start was delayed. But I think the issue of the big issue with Jared Jones when he hasn't looked his best throughout his young big league career is when he doesn't have the fastball command. On days he has it, he looks elite. On days that he doesn't have it, he has to rely heavily on his slider, and sometimes that's good enough to get him through. We saw that in Wrigley earlier in May. And sometimes it's not good enough to get him through, like we saw in Detroit last week. But yesterday, the fastball was playing, especially in the first inning. He threw his 3 fastest pitches of the season in the first inning, 2 of them to Mookie Betts, and then, of course, the 101 high outside on corner to Shohei Ohtani to strike him out. So the fastball was working. The slider was good as always. But to me, the biggest takeaway I had, in addition to the fastball playing well, this guy was using his changeup. And that's been the biggest, I guess, qualm anyone has had with Jared Jones throughout this first 2 months of his big league career is that he's really just been a 2-pitch guy. And granted, he only threw his changeup 9 times, which is just, out of 100 pitches, doesn't seem like a lot, but it's the spots where he used it. In the final at bat, he faced Ohtani. He threw it back-to-back times. Throwing that pitch, something that you're not necessarily confident in, or people don't think you're confident in, back-to-back times against the best player in the world, that's a big deal. That's a step forward. And having the evolution of a third pitch for Jared Jones is going to go a very long way. We talk about Paul Skeens and the fastball and the splinker, but what also separates him is he's got 3 other pitches that he can throw when he's in a jam and his top 2 things aren't working. Jared Jones hasn't necessarily been that way, but I think last night we saw the changeup used in high leverage spots, and that's just another step forward for a young pitcher who's completely using his arsenal now. I was really impressed. I never really thought he was in a slump. I think he just had one bad outing, but to me, that was the second best outing of his career, only behind his 5 innings on 59 pitches in New York. You could point out other stuff like, his start against Colorado at home was good, but considering the lineup that he faced, considering the adversity that he had to deal with, and considering the guy he was competing against on the mound, Chris, who is the baseball's leader in strikeouts, he had no room for error, and he executed flawlessly, 6 scoreless frames against the Dodgers.
Absolutely. He now has an ERA of 3.25. He's pitched 69 innings. It really looks like Jared Jones is for real and continuing to bolster the claims that I think are continuing to be true, that the Pirates have one of the best starting rotations in all of baseball. But unlike what we talked about and how throughout May, the bullpen held up in this game. What happened there?
Man, I mean, that's the thing. I've often said it to our coworker Andrew Destin. I've said to him, I don't think I've written this, but I said this is a team that I'm not sure can win a 1-0 game, just because they're so prone to mistakes, especially in key situations. I look back to even Friday in Toronto, where they're winning 1-0. They get a similar start from Bailey Falter against Barrios, one of the better pitchers in the American League. The game's unfolding the same way it unfolded Tuesday at PNC Park, except, Holderman has 2 outs, a runner on second, and Ji-Hwan Bae loses a ball in the sky that was very catchable. That run comes home to score. They go on to lose the game in the 14th inning. So that's where my lack of confidence was. But the bullpen has looked better in June, Chris. I mean, I think it started in Toronto in that extra innings game, going up against that loaded Blue Jays lineup. You got a good outing from Holderman, even though he allowed that run. That was not his fault. Chapman threw a scoreless frame. Bednar has been great since the end of April. And then you're seeing the young guys come along. Guys like Majinski, they've pitched a little bit better in high leverage situations. Hunter Stratton's still hot and cold. You're just getting, but it's mainly the big three. The Chapman, Holderman, Bednar. That's how this team was designed. They built this team with the idea that your starting pitcher can go 6 innings and then you hand it over to those 3 for the final third of the game. And that's exactly how they wanted that win to go. When you draw that up, you get a quality start from your rookie stud and you hand the ball over 1 inning to each of your top 3 relievers. They were in control. It got a little dicey. I think if they're playing that game in a couple of different ballparks, they might lose 3-1 because of 3 solo homers. But the dimensions of PNC Park rewarded them, and they made big pitches when they needed it. Aroldis Chapman with runners on the corners, getting that strikeout. That's a game-defining moment right there. That's an at-bat that last month, he probably issues a walk-on. So just seeing that type of progress, and like I've said on this show before, Chapman's going to have those months where it's going to be good and he's going to be bad. It looks like he's trending upward right now. I know it's still nerve-wracking when he's out there on the mound, but that final at bat, I don't think he threw 1 pitch under 100 miles an hour. He looked locked in. And if that's the back-end bullpen that they can get those 3 guys, this team could be able to rally off a lot of wins.
Is this a triggering point where maybe Chapman can get out of his funk that he's been in? Because you even saw like the frustration that he had, like some of the pitches he was missing, the jam he got in, and then the pitch that he thought was gone, and then it was an out, and you saw him like throw it. I thought the game was over too. I was like, well, I guess this is done, and then I was like, no, that's an out. Like he's fine, and I was like, okay. But is this something that you think can help get him out of what he's been in that's been such a problem?
Maybe. I mean, this guy's been playing baseball for a long time, Chris. And I think that we're past the point in his career. If we're talking about a guy like Jared Jones or a rookie or someone who's even just 2-3 years into their big league career, then absolutely. But I mean, we're talking about a 7-time All-Star. This guy's been pitching since I was in high school. So, I mean, he's someone that I don't think one good outing or one bad outing is going to impact him much of any way at all. I do think it's good for the entire team when you know that, hey, when you see him have success, it builds confidence. It lets everyone play a little looser because, you know, when a high investment, a big piece to the puzzle is going through a slump, it affects everyone. It just does. And that's how it works in any type of team sport. But when you see Chapman playing well, or getting through the jams and doing what he's paid to do, that's going to create confidence throughout your entire bullpen. So I don't know if it necessarily will help him. I think Chapman is just going to be Chapman every day of the week. You're going to get him sometimes good. You're going to get him sometimes bad. But after that, I mean, I think it could have a ripple effect on other people, though.
Absolutely. Tonight, rather, the Pirates are back out there against the Dodgers, and it's Paul Skeens' turn to take on what is a loaded lineup, and he's going up against James Paxton, another really good pitcher who hasn't lost a game yet and has an ERA of 3.29. What are you expecting to see tonight from the Pirates, Noah?
I mean, ideally you see the same thing. I mean, Paul Skeens, his first big league start, I think he had a little bit of nerves. He would never admit that. But since that MLB debut, I mean, we've seen a lot of the same from him. It's been great command. It's been a strong mix of pitches. It's been getting in control. It's been a lot of swing and miss. And he hasn't really faced a ton of adversity. There have been a couple of innings where he's had runners on, but nothing too crazy. This is his first true challenge, and I don't think there are many teams that will challenge him more than this lineup, which, I mean, the first 3 hitters are all former MVPs in the prime of their careers. That's going to be fun. Just that first inning. And it's outings like this, Chris, that make Paul Skeens better, that make Jared Jones better, that really test you. And regardless of how it goes, if it goes well, it gives him more confidence. If it goes poorly, it's something for him to learn from. It's a big day for him and just his, you know, in the infancy of his career, either way, just because this is a milestone moment. This is start number 5, and it's against arguably the best lineup in the sport. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Like I've said numerous times on different podcasts and everything, you know, you can't root for the team you cover, but I will root for the sport I cover. I love baseball. I love good baseball, and this is good baseball. This is the hottest commodity as far as a pitching prospect goes in over, 10, 15 years against a team that, sells tickets wherever they're playing. This is something everyone should be excited to watch, and I am a part of that.
Absolutely. He's Noah Hiles. You can read all of his work along with Andrew Destin on the Pirates beat here for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette at post-gazette.com. Noah, thanks so much for joining us. Also, thank you to Ray Fittipaldo for joining us. We hope that everyone has a great Wednesday. We'll have more from Steelers OTAs as the week continues, and we're back Friday here on the North Shore Drive podcast and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Remember to subscribe to all of our podcasts on your favorite podcasting app and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of those episodes. And remember the daily content that comes out from all of our Pittsburgh sports writers. We'll see you here Friday again here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.